All right, we are back here getting ready to preview Super Bowl 55, take a deep dive into the matchup. Join me today, the very knowledgeable Bax football guru on Twitter, Russell Baxter is here. Russell, how are you?
I'm good, Mike. How are you?
Doing pretty good. I got to say, I'm very excited about this matchup. What was your initial thoughts when you saw this lock in as Chiefs Buccaneers?
Well, I mean, it's the irony of a team playing a Super Bowl in its home stadium when there's really not going to be a home field advantage was one thing. Although I give enormous credit to the NFL by them sending out, 7,500 healthcare workers are going to be attending the game of the 22,000. Bravo to the league, who is, 10 days away from pulling off a full season, which I'm sure a lot of people weren't sure they were actually going to get it in. It's a rematch from the regular season. It's the last game the Buccaneers lost this season. And I still have visions of Tyreek Hill running through the Buccaneers secondary for over 200 yards in the first quarter. And yet Tampa Bay made it close. You got a team that's won 7 games in a row, Mike. And you got a team that's 25-2 in its last 27 games. So this ought to be fun.
It will be a lot of fun. You brought up a lot of interesting points. I want to start out with that Week 12 game, which you mentioned, the rare opportunity to get a regular season rematch in the Super Bowl. And you mentioned Kansas City wins 27-24. They jump out big in that game, 27-10. I said Tyreek Hill's running through the secondary of the first half. Tampa comes back in the second to make it close. So what is worth remembering from that matchup? What sticks out to you, something to watch going into this game? Well,
the Kansas City defense making plays near the end of the game to preserve the win. I thought that was the key because Tampa Bay and Tom Brady were going to make a run at one time or another. And it was part of that second half of the year where a lot of people were very critical of the Chiefs because they weren't, quote unquote, winning by enough. Okay? That must be a new statistic. And I've been doing this for a long time. I never heard the stat winning by enough. Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't Tom Brady on a Super Bowl team in 3 of the 4 years where they won all 3 Super Bowls by a field goal?
Yeah, that's correct.
Was that enough?
I would think so.
I would think so too. So, listen, 25-2 speaks for itself. By the way, one of those losses when they sat a lot of people against the Chargers in Week 17. Here's the little. By the way, this is the 14th time that teams met during the regular season and then meet the Super Bowl. The team that won the first game, 6-7. So we shall see. What's also very interesting is you've got a Tampa Bay team that, again, is playing in its own stadium. And they were 5-3 at home this year. And Kansas City went 8-0 on the road. So take that for what it's worth as well. So there's you could talk about 100 different things, and now you can get to Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady. This will be the second time in 3 years they will meet twice in the same season and meet in the postseason. Okay? 2 years ago, Tom Brady and the Patriots won both games. And amazing as it seems, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs scored 40 points in Foxborough and lost, and 31 points at home in overtime and lost. Last year, Mahomes got the better of him in Foxborough. This year, Mahomes and the Chiefs won at Tampa. So, I don't want to call it a rivalry, but it's going to be the 5th meeting in 3 years between a living legend and, one of the bright stars in this league and one of the brighter quarterback prospects to come up in a while.
Yeah, I think in terms of the Brady Mahomes thing, I had a guy, my friend Kevin Walsh from Sports Grid last week, who was on my podcast, made a good, interesting comparison, sort of NBA terms. It's sort of like we got the LeBron Kobe final we never got, and we're getting that Brady Mahomes playing Super Bowl. What do you think about that analogy?
Well, that's not bad. Yeah, I could definitely see that. It certainly makes sense as far as the generations and so on. And the fact that it's actually now going to be the Super Bowl, and 2 years ago was the AFC Championship game. But I'll tell you what stands out the most about this matchup. Now we're actually talking about the matchup line. As you know, Mitchell Schwartz hasn't been playing for the Chiefs, the right tackle. And on Sunday, they lost Eric Fisher, the left tackle, to an Achilles injury. And I watched Aaron Rodgers get sacked 5 times last Sunday with Ndamukong Suh and Jason Pierre-Paul, who has, played probably the best football since he left the Giants, after, the hand accident and all that, and Shaq Barrett. And can they keep Patrick Mahomes out of harm's way? Now, I will say this, Aaron Rodgers can be mobile, but Patrick Mahomes is a different kind of mobile. Okay, I'm not saying he's Lamar Jackson, okay, but he knows how to maneuver. He knows how to get out of trouble. He knows how to throw the football from so many different directions, sidearm, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's going to be the thing to watch because they're not going to be able to keep that pass rush out of there forever. And I'll be also interested to see who on the Buccaneers tries to cover Travis Kelce. And I say that because Devin White has had a terrific 2 years in the league. And I'm wondering if Antoine Winfield Jr. can't play, would they put Devin White on Travis Kelce? I always like to throw this out because for 54 years, it still hasn't happened yet. We've never had a tight end named Super Bowl MVP.
Yes, that's certainly true. I feel like you're reading from my notes about the offensive line thing. I had the Eric Fisher thing down, and that's also something you mentioned about Mahomes' mobility. And he has dealing with turf toe right now. And it didn't look like it bothered him too much in the AFC Championship game, but with no Fisher, possibly no Mitchell Schwartz here, like I feel like that's going to be a big deal, especially if Shaq Barrett and JPP are getting in the backfield a lot.
Yeah, well, you saw him last week. And the one thing about Jason Pierre-Paul, if you noticed this year, they've also been dropping him in the coverage. Okay? And I think that has caught teams off guard. And I wonder if they're not going to do it again against the Chiefs. And he's got, I don't have it in front of me, right off the top of my head, I think I remember at least 2 interceptions this year by Jason Pierre-Paul. So Todd Bowles has really mixed things up in that regard, kept teams off balance. And I will also say, though, that Buccaneers secondary, as good as the pass rush can be, that secondary can be extremely vulnerable, especially the big plays. When Patrick Mahomes was done in that game, by the way, he got a lot in the first quarter, but Tyreek Hill still finished with 13 for 269 and 3. And Patrick Mahomes in Tampa Bay flew for 462. So those are pretty big numbers to overcome.
Yeah, you mentioned Tyreek Hill, and I would say, obviously, like, if he does something like that again, he's going to win the Super Bowl MVP, regardless of what Mahomes does. So, like, you got to think Todd Bowles right now is sitting in his meeting room saying, how do I stop Tyreek Hill and how do I keep him from wrecking the game? What do you think they're going to try and do to try and slow him down?
Well, whatever they did last time really didn't work. Remember, he had over 200 yards receiving in the first quarter alone. And, then Tampa Bay kind of made a run and so on and made the game close. And the Chiefs' passing game was also going in, kind of spreading things around. So, again, when you have Hill and Kelce, it's something you really got to keep an eye. Here's something I'll also consider. I won't be surprised if Patrick Mahomes starts peppering the Tampa defense with passes to the running backs. Now, I say that is because I think that could force Shaq Barrett to maybe not be as aggressive as a pass rusher. So maybe some outside throws. One of the things I think hurt the Packers last week against Tampa Bay in the second half was not having Aaron Jones, because you don't look at Aaron Jones as just as a runner. You're looking at him as a pass catcher as well. I think not having that outlet guy hurt. That's make no excuses for what happened with Green Bay last week. They had a lot of red zone problems. But I just don't be, if you remember last year in the Super Bowl, one of the unsung heroes was, I believe, Damian Williams, the running back, who I think scored on a run and scored on a reception. Okay? So that's something to remember when it comes to how they're going to attack them. Okay? I don't know if they're necessarily going to do the same thing that they did last year, okay? Or I'm sorry, earlier this year, when they went deep a lot of times and nobody could keep up with Tyreek Hill. I get the feeling the game plan might be a little different. 2 weeks to prepare. Andy Reid's usually pretty good on 2 weeks. And something you can't underestimate here as well. For whatever reason, and it's not all offense, Patrick Mahomes has now started 7 playoff games. The Chiefs have scored at least 30 points in 6 of them. The only game they didn't score 30 points was the game where he got knocked out in the third quarter. So, and he mowed through the Cleveland defense like a knife through butter. So Tampa Bay is going to have its work cut out for them there. But The last time we saw a Super Bowl repeat champion, the guy in the Tampa Bay uniform was behind center, 2003 and 04. So the New England Patriots was the last one to do it. How ironic would it be if Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs did it right in front of Tom Brady?
Yeah, speaking of Tom Brady, one thing I noticed during the NFC Championship game, especially the second half, was he was having trouble making those throws deep down the field to the outside routes. He was high on some stuff to Mike Evans. He made the bad decision when he was being rushed and just threw off his back foot, threw up for grabs. Do the Bucs need to worry about Brady's ability to throw deep down the field against this defense? Or do you think they're going to try and plan around that?
Well, I think it'll depend on opportunities. The thing that's been interesting, Mike, about Tom Brady during the playoffs is his numbers haven't been overwhelming. Okay? Now, if I told you that in his first two playoff games, he completed less than 55% of his passes, or roughly that, okay? In the game against Green Bay, he obviously threw 3 touchdowns. He also threw 3 picks. And yet they scored at least 30 points in every one of those games. I think what Tom Brady has brought to the Buccaneers in the playoffs is really playoff experience. Okay, I threw a pick. There's no reason to panic. And that's what's happened. Last year the Buccaneers turned the ball 41 times. Okay? It's a disaster. Just sloppy football all over. It's different with Brady. Brady's seen so much and done so much and overcome so much, 25-point deficits in the Super Bowl, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, he's kind of unflappable to the regard of that's what he can bring to the players and even to his head coach and offensive and defensive coordinator. He's been around a long time. He's been on the high end and the low end. I mean, here's a guy who threw for 505 yards in the Super Bowl 3 years ago, and they lost.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And I do think it's also interesting to try and find out those guys who are sort of flying under the radar who can make a big difference in this game. I think for me, with Tampa Bay, one of the guys I'm curious about is Rob Gronkowski, because the Chiefs have had some issues with tight ends after their bye. They've given up 7 touchdowns to tight ends since week 10. And you figure that, maybe they're going to try and take away the outside weapons from Brady. And Gronk over the middle, I feel like you could have a big impact in this game.
Well, we could. And, to me, the guy to watch listen, we saw Chris Jones last year in the Super Bowl really make his impact in the fourth quarter when he was knocking down Jimmy Garoppolo's passes. But the guy, their playmaker on defense, they had Frank Clark, I get all that, and so on. And, steady pass rusher. Their defenses played pretty well. Not as good as it did down the stretch last year, but still pretty well. But Tyrann Mathieu is a major X factor. Some people will not realize this. Last year when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, their team MVP was not Patrick Mahomes. The team voted Tyrann Mathieu its team MVP. So that should tell you the impact he had, in his first year with the club. He's always around the football. He will come up with the fumble recovery or the interception. I won't be surprised if he's on Gronkowski at one time or another. I don't know if they necessarily have the linebackers that could Rob Gronkowski, who basically made 1 catch last week, but he made it count. So, Rob Gronkowski in the postseason is usually pretty effective. So it's such a great chess match because we do have the earlier game. We have 2 quarterbacks that are playing really, really well. We have 2 playmaking defenses. I don't think either one of these defenses are great, okay? But they're playmakers. They come up. And Kansas City, never underestimate their special teams. Okay, we saw them in games against Denver and Miami this year, where their special teams made huge, but their defense and special teams scored 4 touchdowns during the regular season, and another never has happened in Super Bowl history. There's never been a punt return for a touchdown in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, we never know. That could change this year. And I want to touch real quick on each team. Let's start with the Chiefs. What's the key to victory for Kansas City, in your opinion?
Well, in these Super Bowls, not turning over to football is huge. Being balanced against Tampa's defense. Don't being afraid to run. Don't put Patrick Mahomes in situations where he's running for his life. Even if you fall behind, stay with the run. You'll have Le'Veon Bell is expected to come back this week. Clyde Edwards. I'm butchering that right now. I apologize.
Yeah, CEH. Let's go with.
Yeah. Remember, in the game against Buffalo this year, he showed he could carry the football big time, 161 yards. He's a punishing runner. they've got to test the Tampa defense. They can't be intimidated by the fact that the Bucs were number one against the run during the regular season. They need to offer some balance. For Tampa Bay, I think it's avoid giving up the big plays deep. And we've seen that. Listen, they've given up a lot of passing, and they've certainly given up their share of points in these playoffs. I mean, they've scored at least, 31, 30, and 31. But they've given up 23 and 20 and 26. So, and remember when these teams played earlier this year, it was a 27-24 game. Okay? So, I don't expect either one of these teams to get set down. I think maybe Kansas City's special teams in terms of returns could certainly prove to be an edge. But it was hard not to like this matchup for the potential of what it could be. And it's more, like I said, more than about the quarterbacks. You've got some great receivers on Tampa, good tight ends. You've got a speedster in Hill. Nicole Hardman is a guy you got to keep an eye on as well. I guess the big question be, will another quarterback be named Super Bowl MVP? There have been 54 Super Bowls, and the quarterback's been named MVP 30 times.
Yes, that's certainly true. And I think the odds would probably lean towards the quarterback winning the MVP again. And before I let you go, I do want to ask about one other quarterback, because now as of the day of recording, there are rumors out there right now that Deshaun Watson is on the trade market, that he's asked for a trade from the Texans. Like, how seismic would it be for the league if the Texans are actually stupid enough to move him?
I guess that's what you call a leading question, huh?
Yeah.
I think it would depend on what they got for him. Okay. I mean, it could be your basic, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Okay. I still think there's a ways to go before he gets moved and so on. But you got to be a team. Listen, he's only been in the league 4 years, so he can command big money. The team's going to command a lot of draft choices or high draft choices. Is there a team in this league that is willing to part with both? Because that's what you're going to have to do. You might have a team that's it's funny, Jacksonville's got a lot of draft picks and they have a lot of cap room, but I get the feeling that's not where they're going, and I don't think Houston's going to trade within the division. So there's going to be you're going to do some tricky financing, and if you give up draft choices, it might be a thing where you have to give up draft choices 2 or even 3 years down the line.
Yeah, I think in terms of that, I think the fit to me, again, I don't think Houston's going to move him. I still am convinced of that, but if they did, I still think in terms of the fit between having the money and the picks, I think the Jets make too much sense.
Well, yeah. Listen, they're certainly in the running, and, there's been rumors out there that he wouldn't mind playing for them and so on. The Texans now have a new head coach, so David Cooley, and, there's also been talk that I don't even know how true it is that Watson and him, spoken before, met before at the Pro Bowl last year or whatever it was. So who knows? Whatever is going on down at Houston, it's a bad look for the team. And, they're the last team to hire a head coach. We technically haven't really named general manager yet. So it's hard to tell what's going on. There's still a resentment and smoke from last year from the DeAndre Hopkins deal and, Bill O'Brien getting fired after a lousy start. So it's hard to believe that entering this year, the Texans had won the division for the 5 previous years.
Yeah, I feel like I'm glad I'm not a Texans fan. I feel like their whole franchise has gone downhill since blowing the 24-0 lead in Kansas City last year in the playoffs. But Russell, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, how can you follow you on social media? Keep on some of the stuff you're doing. Bax Football Guru, Julie Noted PFG, and PFG Vibe are the 3 Twitter accounts to follow. You can follow me on Fansided, NFL Spin Zone, and Full Press Coverage if you want to read my work. Yeah, make sure you check all that stuff out. Russell, thanks for all the time. I appreciate it.
You got it.